full of stories. Stories of mysteries, of curiosities, of oddities. Join Kat and Jethro Gilligan-Toth for the strange, the bizarre, the unexpected, as they lift the lid and cautiously peer inside the box of oddities.
We're so excited to be here.
It's our first New York show.
Yeah.
This is a big deal. Yeah. We're pretty fancy.
We're Kat and Jethro, or as the security team at our new apartment complex refers to us as,
the age difference couple.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we have to deal with. We went to dinner last night. Where did we go? Was the place that we went?
Industry Kitchen?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It was really good.
And,
I got a cheese board.
We're ordering drinks, and the person comes up and goes, we need to see your ID. So I'm fumbling around for my ID, and I'm thinking, why would you card me? And my Blockbuster video rental card fell out. So he said, nah, never mind.
You're good.
We're good.
You're good.
It's not necessary.
I saw a rat.
Yeah, she did. It was
just
a
the
huge rat.
Yeah. It was. Oh, pizza rat.
Yeah. We love
Moment
pizza
for pizza
rats.
rat.
Yeah.
I love pizza rat.
She was actually down on the waterfront under a bench with a granola bar going, trying to get him to come out.
Such a chonky boy. Yeah, I get
Yeah.
a picture that I'll show it to you later.
Well, show it
It's
to you
fine.
later.
It doesn't need to happen right now.
We saw on social media that, as we've experienced in the past, people have traveled a great distance. Somebody flew from, what was it, Toronto?
Toronto.
Where's Toronto?
Who came from
Yeah,
Toronto?
All right. Anybody beat Toronto? Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Wow.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Washington, D.C. Clinton, Maryland. Well,
You
we
have something else to
welcome
do
you
while
all.
you're here?
We're so glad you're here.
Oh, the distant past. I love that. It's a time-space thing.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get it.
No, probably not. No. If it's quantum, it's...
See, what happens is
when
when it folds, the two parts connect, and you can... It's like that lake in Fringe.
It's exactly like the lake in Fringe. Okay, so for those of you who don't listen to the podcast, maybe you just kind of stumbled in here tonight, we like to say that, first of all, you're welcome here. As long as you're kind, we don't care who you are, what you believe, you're welcome here as long as you're kind. At the same time, if you're not familiar with what we do, apologies in advance, because... It can get pretty
it's not
pretty
always
ugly.
great.
No, it's not always.
Sometimes it's weird.
Not always great. So what we'll do is I'll tell a story, and then she'll tell a story, and then we've got a surprise for you at the end of the show tonight. So I look forward to that.
Ooh, a surprise.
You like surprises?
Is it? But is it a surprise for me also?
Sure. Yeah.
Do I know about the surprise?
No, you don't know what the surprise is. No.
Do I not know about the surprise?
Yes, you know what the surprise
okay.
is.
I know about it.
Sit down. Let's do this.
Okay, yay!
Are we ready? Okay. Oh, easy. All right.
Hi, I'm sitting now.
Somebody actually died for this show, so hopefully it won't be us. Anyway, okay, so we like to do stories about things that happened in the area that we're in.
Yeah.
Localized stories. And this one happened almost exactly a decade ago. It was October 5th in 2011.
2011.
A construction crew that was involved in the demolition of a building in Queens made a grisly discovery.
You're not the boss of when the echo happens.
Okay, I'm sorry. The backhoe, it was tearing through the earth, and it hit what looked like a pipe, a metal pipe, and it pulled it up, and inside was a body of an extremely young, well-preserved African-American woman. And due to the condition of the body, they assumed that it was somebody that had been recently either murdered or recently died, and so they thought it was a crime scene.
Okay, got it. I mean, that's what I would assume if I found a body.
A victim of foul play. Well, it looked like maybe she'd been dead a couple of weeks or something like that.
Okay, got it. Oh, it's 7, I love you.
Yeah, that's right, 7-11. Every time it's 11 after the hour, we say it's 7.
Don't be gross.
Yeah,
anyway,
okay.
body.
All right. So the backhoe exposed the body. It also scattered pieces of the pipe that it was in all over the construction zone. And law enforcement was called in. So they show up, and they quickly tape off the area and declare it a crime scene.
Took out their flashlights.
And what they discovered after more closely examining the pipe was that it was not a pipe. It was actually an iron casket.
Ooh, that's neat.
So quickly, the gentleman's name was Scott Warnish. He was at the time, a forensic archaeologist with the New York City office of the city medical examiner. He declared to the crew that this was not a crime scene. This, in fact, was a historical site. And so what they did was they looked into the history of iron coffins, and they determined that they were very popular for a very short amount of time.
That was actually just going to be my question. Like, were iron coffins a thing for a time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll get into that.
Okay. No, I figured probably
the deal.
would.
Yeah. Iron coffins for a very short period of time were all the rage, usually right around the mid 1850s.
All the kids were getting them.
Yeah, it was popular with the youngsters. Well, at least for youngsters that had a lot of money. They were expensive, so not everyone could have one. And the fact that it was manufactured during a very small window, about a 10-year period in the mid 1850s, they were able to determine roughly the date of death of this young lady. The coffins were invented and patented in 1848 by a stove maker whose name was Almond Dunbar Fisk.
Mr. Fisk was a stover.
He was a stover.
So fun story. I had a teacher in like 6th grade, and his name was Mr. Fisk, and I think he was my first crush. And he was like a super nerd, with the pocket thing, and he wore the glasses, and I drew a picture of him, and I was pretty sure it was like the best picture I'd ever drawn. It's not the point of the story. Actually, I think his name was Mr. Frisk. Anyway, iron coffins, yeah.
They're cool. So, Almond Dunbar Fisk.
Yep.
I love the names from the 1800s.
I know.
Like Ebenezer, names like that.
It's no Dorcas Pope.
No. Mr. Fisk saw a need at the time, and he did not live very far from where we are right now. In fact, in 1846, the Fisk family lived at 70 Cliff Street in Manhattan, which now is actually a parking garage. They moved to a large farm in rural Queens, and Fisk then began experimenting with these iron coffins that were, no, well, maybe he did. I don't know. It could be. I mean, Sure, why not? Maybe that's how he got the inspiration. But the coffins were iron and sealed tight, and that is why the body was so well preserved at the time. In 1846, he built a road across his property to enable delivery of raw materials and finished products. And for many years, that was called Fisk Avenue. Today, it's 69th Street, and there's still a Fisk Avenue stop on the number 7 subway line north of his property.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So what was his goal with the iron coffin? Did he have like was he like, no one's getting in this guy, or what was the point?
Well, the main reason they became popular was for the preservation of bodies at the time. This was before embalming was widely used. It was pre-Civil War. Embalming came into practice during the Civil War more and more. In those days, if you were traveling and you died on the road, they buried you where you dropped. was the safest thing that they could do.
Right. Near the river that you tried to forge on the Oregon Trail.
There was no transporting of bodies at the time because of health concerns related to tissue decay, which is how they said it in the 19th century.
Tissue.
And of course, God, rotting bodies smell bad. So, railroads, of course, were starting to connect the country, and at a pretty rapid pace. But they weren't able to transport bodies because of all of those reasons we just mentioned. But then Fisk patented his first airtight iron coffin, and they were the ideal transportation method for getting a dead body on a train to some other part in the country without
that makes perfect sense.
Rotting and stinking everything up. They gained popularity quickly with mostly political elites. They're the ones that had all the money, even back then, mostly in the D.C. area. But demand really skyrocketed when it was used to bury Dolly Madison, former First Lady. Once they used it for that, then everybody wanted one. Everybody that could afford it, anyway.
Well, Dolly Madison was a socialite type, right? And she
also the creator of the delicious snack and cake franchise.
I don't know that that's accurate.
They quickly gained popularity with the political elite, but also people in upper society. They wanted to emulate people like Dolly Madison. So how they built them, they were custom formed to the person. They had sculpted arms and kind of like a sarcophagus.
Okay. Yeah.
And they had a plate glass face.
I don't like that.
Well, you could pull the iron thing aside so that you could see who was in there without them exposing the pathogens and smell to people in the.
You just put a label, post it on there. You don't need to.
That would make a lot more sense. So. The caskets became quite popular for about a 10-year period, but they were extremely pricey. And to put things into perspective, during the 1850s, a pine coffin cost $2, which is about $70 in today's money. The Fisk iron coffin cost as much. Usually, it started at about $100, which is $3,516 in today's money. So they're highly desirable, but not everybody could afford them. So the question was, how did this young African-American woman from the mid-1800s here in New York City end up in one of Fisk's famous iron coffins? It certainly was unusual since she did not appear to fit the profile, a political elite.
Right.
And we didn't know who she was. We didn't know where she was from. And most interestingly, we did not know her story. But before they could delve into that question, when they were first looking at the body, it was very, very well preserved. It was covered in smallpox lesions. And that was kind of their reaction. Yeah. This isn't good. Yeah. Smallpox, that's something that could be a real issue.
No, thank you.
So the investigation came to a screeching halt, for a little while until they could move forward and hopefully answer some of the questions. They needed to call the CDC in to determine whether or not the smallpox lesions were, in fact, contagious. Now,
right. How well was this body preserved? Was the smallpox also preserved?
Exactly.
Right.
They had never encountered a situation like this before. You would think that after 150, 160 years or whatever, that probably no, but they had never been in this situation before.
They probably knowed.
No. Yeah. Please don't throw things. Please.
Sorry. Please don't leave me.
This, of course, a potentially dangerous situation. The CDC declared smallpox eradicated in the early 1980s, and that meant an entire generation of people globally had not been vaccinated since then. And if this tissue was in fact infectious, tissue, it could unleash a global health crisis, the likes of which has not been seen since this young lady was walking around upright. Fortunately, the CDC quickly determined that there were no active contagions, and so they were able to move forward with the examination, try to find out what the heck's going on. who is this woman? Why was she there?
I have real quick. Okay,
Yeah.
so I can't help but think like these coffins weren't cheap, right? And if you wanted to make sure you got one, like you might buy one before you kick it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my brain won't stop thinking of like, how could I use this coffin? And I'm like, okay, so I have people over. I fill it with ice. I put like their drinks in there. Cool. Okay. So I have maybe get some potting soil, put it in there.
Yeah, you get your tomatoes in, a little early, and
Well, I was thinking tulips,
okay, well that
but
works.
whatever. What?
It's utilitarian.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the fact
I
that
think
you
it's
had
the
to go
Mainer in me. I'm like, how could I use this to my benefit?
Yeah. The fact that you had to go in and be fitted for this coffin.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're going to have it around. Well, hopefully, you'd have it around for a while. So that, at least a coffee table or something.
Right.
So the medical examiner's office said, quote, she looked like she had been dead for a week, but actually it was 160 years. They were amazed at how ordinary this woman was. She didn't seem to be wealthy or privileged or well-known, just a regular person. How did she get a Fisk coffin? It's too much money.
What did you call it earlier? Fisk's famous coffin?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
what they advertised it as.
How'd she get a Fisk's famous coffin? Like that?
So could smallpox have been the reason why she ended up in this sealed coffin? That makes sense. Did her friends and loved ones bury her that way because they feared that the disease would spread? Possibly. But how did such a, quote, ordinary young woman end up in a essentially $3,500
Fisk's
casket?
famous coffin.
As the examination continued, it was revealed that she was wearing a white gown. She had a cap on, knee socks, and she had this beautifully handcrafted comb that was carved out of bone that was put in the back of her hair. Clearly, this woman had been cared for. She was lovingly prepared for the burial. So, again, who and how, the answer to the question, we need to kind of like go back into history in this area just a little bit. New York had been one of the largest slaveholding states in the early history of the U.S., but they officially abolished slavery on July 4th, 1827. Freed Americans, as well as those who escaped the South, began to establish communities here in New York City, including the Queens community of Newtown, which is now Elmhurst. Elmhurst is where they found this body.
Anyone here from Elmhurst? I don't know where Elmhurst is, so. All right, woo!
The location of the discovery was once the African Methodist Episcopal Church and Burial Ground. It's where it had once stood. I don't know, maybe they were building a parking garage or something at the time. I'm not sure what they were building there. The original church was founded in 1828 by the first generation of free black people in the region. There are, however, some newspaper clippings that indicate that it had been an African-American cemetery on the land as much as a decade earlier than that. And even before that, it was founded by the Dutch community. So it had been a burial ground since the Revolutionary War era, at least. One research team moved forward to try to identify the woman by researching church records and other public records. And they did a non-invasive autopsy. That was conducted by the medical examiner's office. They used state-of-the-art digital imaging software and CAT scans, and PBS did a story on this, and it was really cool how they did it. They scanned her body, and it was visible on this huge table. It was a giant screen, essentially, on the top of the table, and they could spin the body around and zoom in on it and take away different layers and essentially get inside the body without damaging it anyhow.
Did you watch that special?
Yeah.
Without me?
Yeah. You were out looking for a new dog, so, which by the way we got, so that's exciting. Yeah, new puppy.
I got it right now.
So we named him. If you understand this reference, you're gonna love it. Probably most people are gonna go, huh? We named him Howard Moon. Anybody know who Howard Moon is? Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yay.
Cool. You're one of us. Woohoo! So The technology allowed them to investigate the remains without doing any further damage to the body, and it had already been damaged pretty badly.
By the backhoe?
By the backhoe. It actually destroyed the left side of this woman's skull.
Excuse me. Is it backhoe or is it backhoe? Backhoe. Backhoe.
Backhoe.
Or because you just said backhoe.
Yeah. Is it? I always thought it was backhoe.
Backhoe?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hoe that goes back. Who knows? I'm not really sure.
That feels made up.
Well, most of the stuff we talk about is.
That's true. No, it's fair. That's fair. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
So, one of the most fascinating discoveries that they came across during this non-invasive autopsy was the aggressive nature of the smallpox virus. Now, again, it was eradicated in 1980. I don't know when the last death was, but it's been a while. We always knew that smallpox created lesions, and they can cover you from head to toe. But what this non-invasive CAT scan taught us was that when we peered inside the body, the lesions were formed all inside the body, too. They were on her brain. They were on her liver.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't. That makes me feel
on her
all kinds of
heart.
icky.
Yeah, yeah. And we did not know this until they found this extremely well-preserved young lady. There was no indication that this was the case. The young woman was literally filled with smallpox lesions from her lungs on down.
I don't like the way you said that just now.
Now, we didn't know that this was the case, and it was because we learned this because she had been sealed in an airtight casket, essentially preserving the body long enough to allow technology to evolve to a point where this examination was scientifically possible. So, what we discovered to this point is that this woman was in her mid-20s, African American. She died of smallpox sometime in the mid-1800s. She would have been about 5 foot 2 inches tall.
Okay.
The iron coffin that she was buried in had a maker's mark stamped on the foot. That indicated the date of the manufacture. That information, along with the style of clothing that the woman was wearing, indicated the approximate time of death to be about 1850. They thought that was a pretty good guess, 1850.
And she still had all of her parts and stuff.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
I know.
That's nuts.
So now we have a pretty good idea of when this young woman died. We may know why she was buried in the coffin, smallpox, but we still don't know who she was, not to mention how she ended up in one of these famous Fisk coffins.
Famous Fisk coffins.
But with the information that they had, the investigators were able to zero in on 1850, and they already had researched church records. So what they did is they took that data and they compared it with the census records from 1850, and that provided them with some clues as to who this woman's identity was. Okay. They were able to determine that the remains likely belonged to a young woman whose name was Martha Peterson.
Stop it.
Martha was a resident here in New York City. She was the daughter of John and James Peterson. She died when she was 26 years old of smallpox. The fact that she was so well cared for, buried by loving hands, it reveals a glimpse into the close-knit community of the emancipated African-American community at the time.
But also it shows like so much information could have been put on a Post-it.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, just...
They should have had Post-its back in the 1900s. What was wrong with them? Iron coffin, yes. Post-its, no.
Post-its.
Investigators said that even though she was contagious with smallpox, the people who were with her cared enough about her to clean her body. They dressed her. They did her hair, even though she was probably contagious, potentially with a life-threatening disease, then they were putting themselves at risk. Property records indicate that Martha Peterson lived with a man named William Raymond. Okay. William Raymond was the brother-in-law and neighbor, as well as business partner, of Almond Dunbar Fisk.
Almond Dunbar Fisk.
The iron coffin creator.
Oh, that's so
Fisk's famous coffin.
Fisk's famous coffin.
So now they had established a direct connection between Martha and the iron coffins. In addition, the remains of the iron casket that she was buried in were examined more closely, and they noticed that the logo mark at the bottom was kind of off-center. So probably it didn't pass inspection. The coffin was completely functional. It was totally fine. There was nothing wrong with it, except that the maker's mark was just a little bit off-center.
Tell you what, I've got this wonky coffin in the back, and we're going to go ahead and set Martha up with this wonky coffin.
Well, they put it aside, thinking it's still a completely functional coffin,
Right.
and if inventory dwindles, then we'll have this. But obviously, they were saving it for the right moment, and the right moment ended up being a friend and housemate dying of smallpox. And so they put her in this coffin.
Wow.
Yeah. So you put all the pieces together. Here's what we know about Martha Peterson, based on all the research. She was born in 1824 to John and James Peterson here in New York City. She died of smallpox in 1851, was buried in the Dutch Lane churchyard, which was founded in 1828 by the first generation of fully emancipated African Americans in Queens. Records also suggest that she was taught by escaped slave minister, educator, and abolitionist James W.C. Pennington. So that's amazing. We've learned a lot about who Martha was, where she lived, who her family was, where she went to church, how she ended up in a Fisk casket. But because of the extremely well-preserved body, we have a pretty good idea of what she looked like as well.
That's incredible, because so often the entire lives and histories of Black people from that time were just lost. And the fact that we know so much, and it's because of Fisk's famous coffins, that's pretty amazing.
Well, I mentioned earlier that when she was exhumed, the backhoe damaged the left side of her skull. But forensic artists digitally repaired it. They essentially took half of it and reversed it, and they were able to repair the skull. And then they made a model of it. And then, using forensic facial reconstruction techniques, they were able to recreate what Martha looked like.
That's amazing.
They then presented it to the pastor and members of the same church that Martha had attended so many years ago.
That's so cool.
Today, the church is known as St. Mark African Methodist Episcopal. It stands less than a mile from the original church that was on Dutch Lane.
Which is how far from here? Do we know? Like, I don't know.
Is it by Rikers Island? How far is that?
Like, how far is that from?
We don't have no idea. We don't know.
I know where Leo's
About 8 miles?
is because breakfast.
Yeah, she had Leo's bagels this morning.
Oh, so good. Sorry,
To her, she's been culturally fulfilled here in New York City with the bagels. So they made this model and they passed it on, and the history of the church that they presented this information to can be traced all the way back to the community that was established by the United African Society of Newtown more than 160 years ago.
Wow.
Pastor Kimberly Dethridge said, quote, "Because of her and because of the finding of her, our church has seen a renewed fervor in learning about who we are and who we were. We lost some of that history throughout the years."
Oh, I love that.
In 2016, Martha Peterson was given a proper burial by St. Mark's African Methodist Episcopal Church of Jackson Heights.
Nice.
Quite possibly, and very likely, by the descendants of people she worshiped with more than a century and a half ago. Same church.
You wrote this really well.
Thanks.
It sounds really good. Like, right? Is that? You did a great job.
Yeah. So her 166-year journey came full circle when she was reinterred by members of her own church 5 years after she was discovered. But it was also quite a journey and an education for everybody involved, and us too, since that early October afternoon in 2011, when a construction crew accidentally unearthed Martha Peterson, who is known as the Lady in the Iron Coffin.
Wow. Wow.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
I love the
Here a
idea
little.
that we can have this direct connection with the past. It's an unbroken chain of events, and being part of that on this end and knowing the history of this woman is a remarkable thing. It really is.
And all it took is a backhoe.
And Fisk's famous coffins.
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
we were going
Yep.
to have a merch table with some Fisk. No.
We should just little ones.
Yeah, and we don't have a merch table. Usually, for those of you who have been to previous shows, we have a merch table. We don't have a merch table this time. Yeah, I know.
We have a show this year. A show.
Yeah, one show. It's been a year and a half.
Find
We've
shirts
done
for that.
one show. That's it. I do have some pictures of this.
Oh, yeah, let's see pictures.
Can we show those? All right. Here's the ad for Fisk's famous coffins. Yeah. All right. Here she is. This is how she looked when they found her. And the smallpox discovered in the laboratory, that's how pronounced it was. But I want you to look at this. I leave you with the face of Martha Peterson looking at you from 170 years ago.
Thanks for listening to the Box of Oddities. Now it's time for intermission, so won't you please stretch your legs and have a smoke, buy some snacks and drinks, or use the toilets and wash your hands in those bathroom sinks. However, if you're not attending the live show right now, this doesn't apply to you, and you can pee wherever, we don't care when or how. But nonetheless, the larger point I'm making is just this: it's intermission, and we'll be back as soon as everyone takes a piss. Piss!
Show starts in 5 minutes.
And now, the Box of Oddities brings you That Thing in the Middle.
Halloween 1950. Scores of children dressed as cowboys, skeletons, and supposedly not creepy clowns became ill. Their post-hall feasting had been interrupted by welting rashes and severe diarrhea.
It was discovered that the common link was candy and popcorn balls tinted by orange dye number 1.
Now, this FDA-approved food coloring is also known as FD&C Orange Number 1. The FD&C indicates that the dye is used in foods, drugs, and cosmetics.
The food part of that was the real problem. The dye, primarily in candy, cookies, cakes, carbonated beverages, and meat products such as hot dogs, is a coal tar dye, derived originally from the hydrocarbon byproducts of processed coal.
Orange 1, for instance, contains benzene, today one of our better-known toxic compounds. Studies found that an oral dose of 1 gram of dye per 1 kilogram of food killed 2 out of 5 mice in a day. In 1956, the FDA delisted Orange 1.
In the year 2000, a postal worker at the Dead Letter Office in Hercules, California, came upon a package destined for San Francisco that had made its way back to the USPS.
This, like many packages that don't have a return address, would be donated. The package, which contained 4 bags of mini Snickers bars, was taken home instead, as Halloween was right around the corner and the postal worker thought he'd hand them out to the kids.
Kids were surprised to find the wrappers, though, were not filled with delicious caramel, peanuts, and nougat. Instead, they were chock full of marijuana. Police traced the treats back to the postal worker and were convinced that he'd made an honest mistake. He was neither charged nor publicly named.
In 1964, a New York woman named Helen File was arrested for handing out packets containing steel wool, dog biscuits, and ant poison on Halloween.
When questioned, the housewife said the packets were a joke. The ant buttons, about the size and shape of bottle caps, are used to kill ants, roaches, flies, and other insects.
They're marked with a skull and crossbones that are labeled poison. Keep away from children and animals.
Mr. File said that his wife's actions might have been thoughtless, but she was not malicious. He said that she loved children and had handed out candy all day, but was disturbed by the number of children she thought were too old to be trick-or-treating.
Mr. File said he was not home at the time, as he had gone trick-or-treating with the couple's 2 boys, aged 14 and 16.
Ah, the 1860s. What an amazing time to be alive. Especially if you enjoyed dysentery and large piles of horse manure. It was also a time of discovery and learning. Hey, look everyone, it was 1863 and the doors opened for the very first time at the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. As a surgeon, Dr. Thomas Dent Mutter, oh that name, had accumulated medical oddities for teaching purposes. Over the years, it grew into a sizable collection used in founding the museum. Inside the Mutter Museum's corridors rest the strangest and most grotesque displays of medical specimens and artifacts. Some might call it a modern-day freak show. But it's so much more. In this 19th century cabinet museum setting, the museum teaches one to understand the human body's mysteries and beauty, and appreciate the history of diagnosis and disease treatment. It's also pretty frickin' weird. Case in point, the soap lady. See, in 1875, a woman's body was exhumed from a small Philadelphia graveyard. She's unique because a fatty substance called adipocere encases the remains. Often referred to as grave wax, its formation is not common. It's known to form in alkaline, warm, airless environments such as, well, the one in which the soap lady was buried. The reason for the woman's exhumation has been lost to history, but the woman's legacy lives on. More specifically, in the gift shop, where, for that special someone, you can purchase a soap lady on a rope. We're not making this up. Looking for an exhibit that's a little more uplifting? Try the dried-up hand display. Yes, the youngsters will love it, and it'll make you feel much better about your own dry skin. And if those hands are just too dried up for your taste, well, it's only a short walk to the pre-moistened gout hands exhibit. And boy, are these hands gouty. But if hands bloated by an excessive buildup of uric acid crystals and soaked in alcohol is not your thing, then why not swing by the Giant Colon Pavilion? Just how giant is this colon? We just knew you'd ask. Well, when the man who once owned this colon died, it was 30 inches or 76 centimeters around at its widest point, and it had over 40 pounds or 18 kilos of fecal matter packed inside. My, that's a lot. But don't worry, it's currently stuffed with tissue paper and enclosed in a tasteful glass case. And what self-respecting medical oddities museum doesn't have its very own set of twins in a jar? Most displays like these look similar to each other, being twins and all. What makes this one unique is these twins appear to have been frozen in place while performing a song and dance routine on the early vaudeville circuit. Now that was entertainment. Here at the Box of Oddities, we're all about repurposing. Well, for the most part. As much as we appreciate the creative energy that goes into any dermatological arts and crafts project, this genital wart necklace is so last season. Ever wonder what a head with a serious syphilis infection kept in a jar looks like? So did we. It turns out it wasn't everything we hoped for. But 3 syphilis-infected heads in jars? Pinch me, I must be dreaming. As bizarre and unsettling as all of this may be for some people, the Mutter is not the museum that houses the most unexpected exhibits. That distinguished title may have to go to the Victor Wind Museum of Curiosities, Fine Art, and Unnatural History in London. There, you can view such priceless artifacts as a bag of Russell Brand's pubic hair, and, dreams come true, Kylie Minogue's poop in a mason jar. Sealed, of course. The Box of Oddities with Kat and Jethro Gilligan-Toth.
I wonder how much Kylie Minogue's poo would go for on eBay.
I love that Kylie Minogue.
I know.
I just can't get you out of my head. But remember?
Yeah, no, I remember that. But thank you, and now I know what I'm getting you for your birthday, which is next week, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna be 40.
Yeah, that's only like 30 years younger than me. No, it's not that.
No,
it's not.
No. It's close.
I'm a bit older. I know that when our last show we did, it was at Bridgeport, Connecticut, at the Bijou Theater. And because it was relatively close, and we lived in Maine at the time, I drove all the way down with my blinker on. So she's like, no, I'm not going to let you drive anymore. And it's true. Since we've moved, she's been doing all the driving.
That's true. But it's mostly because he's very complimentary about how I drive. So I just really like doing it.
Yeah, and I compliment her because I like being driven around.
Yeah, no, that's
nice.
fair. That's fair. It works for everyone.
So what you got for me?
No jingle?
No. I know. See, this is a real bone of contention.
Yeah.
It really is.
You got booed.
I do. Well, it's not the first time, and I'm sure it's not the last before the evening's over either, now that I think of it. Yeah, we did that jingle way back when, and people fall on one side or the other with that. They either love it or they really hate it and have issued death threats. Well, not exactly that, but pretty close.
It got pretty intense. There was one guy who was like, I swear I will never listen to your podcast. God.
Yeah, he said that, and then we got one that said that every time they hear it, they wanted to pour hot lava in their ears. How is that possible, though?
I know. Where do you even get lava these days?
I know. The price has skyrocketed since the pandemic.
Between that and lumber.
I know. So anyway, what you got?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So at West 74th Street and Central Park West, which is about 5 miles, I guess, which means it would take you, an hour to get there? Good Lord. Anyway, you may have seen a plaque dedicated to Henry Bliss. Now, the plaque states, here at West 74th Street and Central Park West, Henry H. Bliss dismounted from a streetcar and was struck, and C.S. knocked unconscious by an automobile on the evening of September 13th, 1899.
By an auto.
By an automobile.
Automobile.
When, it continues, Mr. Bliss, a New York real estate man, died the next morning from his injuries. He became the first recorded motor vehicle fatality in the Western Hemisphere.
Right here in New York.
Yeah.
Just miles from here. Congratulations. Well done.
You're so special.
Yeah.
You're so special.
So the driver, did he call Jake from State Farm? Well, back at what was that, like the 1800s, you said?
Yeah.
It would have been Ebenezer from State Farm, probably.
Yeah. As long as he was wearing khakis, I'm okay with it, right? Sorry. Anyway, how Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so the sign was erected to remember the centennial of his untimely death and promote safety on our streets and highways. Has anyone ever seen this plaque? Because I tried to find it on like Street View and I got confused. And I mean, honestly, it took me like an hour to find Leo's Bagels this morning. So whatever. The September 13th, 1899 death of Henry Bliss, as I said, the 69-year-old real estate broker, was the first death attributed to an automobile. He was coming down from a streetcar, and he was run over by an electric taxi cab.
What?
Yeah.
They had electric cars back then?
Okay, yeah.
Wow.
So in 1899, 90% of New York City's taxi cabs were electric vehicles.
Wow, have we gone backwards in time?
In 1899 and 1900, electric cars outsold every other type of car.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had no idea about this.
This is
and I
news
was
to
like,
me.
this is not related to our story in any way, but I'm including this because this is interesting. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. I guess there were steam-powered vehicles as well, but more electric cars. Anyway.
Yeah, I remember there was one called the Cleveland Steamer. See, I told you. It was only a matter of time. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Anyway, let's continue.
All right.
All right, so the passenger in the cab, this is just a little juicy tidbit, was Dr. David Orr Edson, who was the son of a former New York City mayor. And he tried to assist while the ambulance was coming, but it didn't matter. The next morning, Bliss was deemed too severely injured to survive, and he passed away. This was actually not an unusual incident, I mean, other than the fact that he kicked it, but a lot of people were injured in this stretch. They called it the dangerous stretch, which I think is a really creative name, New York. Well done. And there had been a lot of accidents there. The cab's driver was arrested and charged with manslaughter, but eventually it was like, hey, you know what? It wasn't really his fault because there was a car parked on this side, and he had to kind of whoop around, and the guy just came out of the trolley. It wasn't his bad. So he was let to toodle.
Which is a legal term from the 19th century.
Yeah. That's what they say.
Let to toodle.
He was let to tootle. So the incident was widespread in newspapers, as you can imagine. The Alton, Illinois Evening Telegraph carried the opening line, "The automobile has tasted blood."
If it bleeds, it leads, even back then.
I can't get enough of that. Like, there's no sensationalism there at all. The automobile tasted blood. I can't wait for more. I'm gonna get some. Anyway, so Mr. Bliss left behind, very sadly, a son, Herbert, and daughter Florence. He had been married twice. Now, it's his second wife that we're gonna move our focus to right away. Okay, so Henry Bliss, and Evelina Bliss had married in July of 1868. It was the second marriage for Evelina as well. So both of them had previous marriages, and they were like, we've had love before, but it didn't work out, and now we're going to try it again.
Which was a popular tune in the late 19th century.
It was titled, "We've Had Love Before, but it didn't work out, and so now we're going to try it again." Yeah. It was a really clever name.
The problem was
written in
the
New
title
York.
was so long that they couldn't print it all in, and that's why it didn't sell as much.
There was actually a pretty substantial inheritance for Evelina, and that was kind of setting them up for a nice life together. And they were social people. Like, they were, what's the word? They were the social elite in New York. They were tootling around with their high neck lacy things and their sticks.
And
they
their
were having a great time.
famous coffins.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Oh, they definitely had one.
They were one of those people.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So. Oh, that's good. So there was also a substantial inheritance waiting for the daughter of Evelina and her previous husband. Her name is Mary Alice. Now, the whole thing was Mary Alice wanted this inheritance, but she didn't get access to it until after her mom had passed away. So her dad's already passed, sad face, McGee, and she's, wanting this money, but even though she had gone to court to try to get it, they were like, no, it clearly says once your mom dies, then you can have this inheritance. And she's fine, whatever.
It's strictly a business decision, people. Come on, I mean, really.
So Mary Alice Almont Livingston Fleming. She was unmarried. She had 3 kids, 1 toddler, a girl of 10, a teenager, and she had a 4th kid on the way.
Wow.
She had recently, I know.
Well, there was no internet back then. There was nothing
girl,
to do.
Get it. She was like, you want to get on this trolley? Huh? Hop on board. Anyway.
Ding, ding, ding. Clang, clang, clang. It'd be a gang clang, right?
Tonight, I want one of you to just clang, clang, clang while you're doing it. I know you've had a few drinks. You're gonna go home. You're gonna be like, I had a really nice time tonight, and I want clang, clang, clang. I want some of that. So please do that.
Anybody do it before they came to the show tonight? Show of hands. After the show, you planning on? Okay.
So
what
you
about
have
right
to get
now?
it done
Anybody doing it right
afterwards.
now?
So don't be weird.
I'm sorry.
God. You're talking a lot about sex stuff, and that's weird.
What's new?
Anyway, ma'am. All right, so Mary Alice had taken Fleming as her last name, even though she'd never married this Fleming guy. But she was like, well, he was the dad of my first kid, so that's what we're going to do. She had actually sued Mr. Fleming for breach of promise at some point, so I'm guessing there was some oh, yeah, I totally want to marry you, and they did not get married, and so she had his kid. And Mary Alice was kind of, jacked up about it. And then he died. And so it was right after he died, she was like, oh, yeah, I'm using Fleming now. It's you can't just do that. But anyway, so she did.
Stationery printed up already. So.
Right. So she did that. And then she was hooking up with a guy, what was his name?
Ebenezer?
I don't remember his name. It was Ebenezer Fisk. And his name was Lewis. Okay, so she and Lewis started banging it out, and she was impregnated by Lewis, and then she sued him for a breach of promise. And there was a pattern going on. But then she found this guy who was German, and he was a coffin maker.
That's weird. Once again, hey, a box set of oddities effect, right? Right in front of your eyeballs.
Wow. It doesn't say that it was iron coffins, but either way, I think that's pretty close.
Yeah, it's close enough.
Yeah. Anyway, so this guy, they had been getting at it for some time. There was a lot of yeah, there was. Okay, so there was some clang, clang, clang going to trolleying. And they had a child together. And then there was another one on the way by a German coffin maker guy. Now.
Well, it's like we need a tote board just to keep track of what's going on here with her.
Is it tote board? Tote?
Is it back-o or?
Anyway.
It's a tow board. Tow board.
Toke?
Toke
board?
Yeah, well, sure.
Oh, Mary Alice is pregnant again. Woo. Anyway, so she's living at the Colonial Hotel, which is at 125th and 8th Avenue, which I guess is not too far from here. And this is where Mr. Bliss lived as well. And at this time, Mr. Bliss is paying all of Mary Alice's bills. And he's made clear to her that this arrangement cannot continue like it's been going on. He's like, you're kind of an adult and these guys, and I can't keep paying your shit. And so things weren't going great in the Fleming Bliss household, especially since Mrs. Bliss, Evelina, had moved out.
Oh.
So
the thought plickens.
So Mrs. Bliss lived on St. Nicholas Avenue, and they were in the process of divorcing. You can see how, like, Mrs. Bliss didn't have a lot of money anymore. Her finances had, and Mr. Bliss was like, I don't want to pay for your shit anymore, Mary Alice. So Mary Alice isn't in a great spot because no one wants to give her money anymore. And Mr. Fleming died, and the coffin maker isn't really making any cash. No one knows where Mr. Lewis, the second baby daddy, is, so she's not in a great spot. Anyway, so it's about this time that Mary Alice is like, my mom deserves like a nice lunch. And so she called her little daughter and her little daughter's friend. So her daughter's like 9-ish, and then her little friend is like 10 or something. And she's like, come on, girls, I want you to bring my mother, your grandmother, and some rando to you, little girl. I want you to bring her some clam chowder in this pail and some pie.
First of all, who serves clam chowder from a pail?
Oh, it was very popular.
Back in the 19th century? Okay.
Clam chowder pail is how you buy it. And so anyway,
Give me your finest pail of clam chowder.
I don't know. I bought a boot of beer. Like, things happen. Yeah. What are you gonna do? So not long after this, completely unrelated, Mrs. Bliss gets violently ill, and it's 11 p.m. Doctors have been called, and she's like, she's dying, and she keeps repeating, "I've been poisoned. It was the clam chowder. It was the pie. I was sick 10 minutes after eating it." And she just keeps repeating this over and over again. And they're like, oh, she died. I wonder what happened. So an investigation was launched into the death of Mrs. Bliss. And on September 9th, 1895, the Glens Falls Daily Times reported 9 days ago, Mrs. Evelina M. Bliss ate some clam chowder. 5 hours after eating it, she was dead. Which, again, I feel like is a very misleading and scary headline because everyone's like...
What? Honey, you want to finish my bucket of clam chowder? I don't want it.
I'll have your bucket.
Oh, I love it.
I love it. Anyway, so there was this investigation, and Dr. Henry A. Mott, who was an analytical chemist, said...
You said an analytical?
Analytical.
Okay.
Not, okay.
No.
Oh, speaking of which, we had an issue with Haggis's butt, but we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a whole... Okay, so...
We'll save
chowder.
that story for later.
Right. He was like, yeah, this is absolutely arsenic poisoning. And immediately after Mrs. Bliss's funeral, two very large men came up and collected Mary Alice from the funeral and arrested her. And Mary Alice is being brought into the jail, or the tombs as they called it, and she's like this, ugh, arrested, what a bore. This is quoted in the newspaper. She's like, this is boring. Well, she's a socialite, and she's become very accustomed to living at this level, and clam chowder bucket. So I do hope, she said, they'll let me out before February. I'd hate to have this baby in the tombs. So anyway, Mrs. Fleming, because her mom died, even though she's in jail, Mary Alice got her inheritance, which I find like super weird. So she had the dollars to invest in a good lawyer. So, as you can imagine, this family that's like societal and all that business, the newspapers are going nuts. She's a high society lady. Apparently she killed her mom with clam chowder. Like, everyone's really interested in what's going on here. And they were, because her name, remember, it's like 8 names long, the Livingstons in the city were like big name people, and they were thrilled that they were using the name Fleming instead, because they were like, do not use Livingston. We are not connected with this lady, even though they were totally connected with her. She wasn't even connected with the Flemings. Anyway, not the point. So, of course, this woman, 4 kids, no husband. The papers were so awful about it because they were like, well, obviously, if she doesn't have like the moral compass to not have 4 kids by 3 different dudes, she could kill someone. It's totally the same. right? And
It's a pretty reasonable step, I think.
it's not a leap at all. God, let ladies get banged. Anyway, thank you. Right? And so she's in front of the newspaper cameras or not the cameras, the like sketch artist guys, and she's wearing her morning outfit and she's playing it up because she's like this little tiny person.
You said photographers and then you went to the artist.
Right, because I haven't seen photos of it, so I assume that there aren't any.
So like back in that day, before photography, when they would lead the defendant out of the courthouse, did they make her stop so they could draw her?
Yeah, for like 3 hours.
Yes, okay.
Like
Let me see a little bit to the left there. Yeah.
Oh, it's getting dark. We're going to have to start again tomorrow. Sorry.
I got to finish my bucket of clam chowder.
So the newspapers referred to her as the little woman in black, which, as you can imagine, gets a lot of people's sympathies, and they're like, "Oh, this tiny baby. Oh, it's 8'11". It's 8. I love you."
There you go.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So during the trial, Mr. Bliss is called to the stand, and as we know, he's had kind of a rough go with Mary Alice, and he said that he himself was sufficiently suspicious of Mrs. Fleming. He said at her funeral, "Mary Alice, did you poison your mother?" And then doctors testified that Mrs. Bliss had most definitely been poisoned. And then they were followed by 11-year-old Florence King, who was like this little tiny baby friend of Gracie, the granddaughter. Excuse me. Now, could I? Okay. So they were asking Florence about the day of the clam chowder pail. And she was like, yeah, she asked us to bring some clam chowder over. And the prosecution asked, is that for me? So the prosecution asked.
Haggis does that when we open the fridge.
Anyway, so what did Gracie's grandmother do with the pail of clam chowder? And she said, she put it in a pitcher. And she was like, well, what did the prosecution said, what did Gracie's grandmother do with I love you. You're my favorite person in the whole world.
Amber, ladies and gentlemen.
Amber. Yes. You're my favorite ghoul.
She's your ghoul friend. Dad jokes.
Okay. So what did she do with the pie? And she said she put it on a plate. And then the prosecution said, when you got back to the hotel, did you see Mrs. Fleming, meaning Mary Alice? And little Florence said, yes. And what did Gracie say to her mama? And Gracie said, Grandmama said the clam chowder was very nice. And what did Gracie's mama say to you? And Gracie's mama, Mary Alice, said, I sure hope you didn't eat any of that.
First of all, it came in a pail. So that's your first tip.
The New York Times reported that Mrs. Fleming sat cool and almost contemptuous in manner while this child was giving her testimony. Meanwhile, the defense comes up, and they've offered some alternate explanations. They said that Mary Alice obviously wouldn't have sent her own kid with the poison. That seems bananas, right? And obviously, the kids would have dipped into that clam chowder. 10-year-olds can't get enough of pale chowder all the time. Can't resist it, especially on a nice summer day. And also, the defense said the arsenic could have been deliberately put into Mrs. Fleming's belly by you, as an attempt to win this case and get notoriety.
Bum, bum, bum.
Which, I mean, I guess we could just say about anything. Like, I didn't put that bullet in him. That was put there by another person who wanted to win a court case. Like, you just can't do that. Anyway, so, right? Gunpowder. I don't know. So, the defense is putting Mary Alice on this pedestal and saying this willful child, like New York is putting this willful child on trial because they don't like who she is, and they want the blood of this willful child. He is quoted as saying, New York...
Were they an automobile?
New York is basically a pack of wolves and a flock of vultures bent on drinking the blood of this willful child.
Wow.
Who is 37 years old.
Wow.
Mary Alice is 37 at this point.
Oh my God.
She's like popping them out everywhere. Okay. You can imagine how the newspapers and those reading them were stunned after 12 hours of deliberation when the jury came back not guilty.
Oh, man.
Now, after this point, Mary Alice is pissed, and she's out for revenge. So she sues Henry Bliss because ex-stepdad here owed her money. There was a time where he was supposed to be paying her rent, and he weren't. And so she's like, well, you owe me money. She claimed breach of promise. And unfortunately, she still owed some money for her apartment at number 305 West 138th Street. Unclear whether or not Henry Bliss actually had to pay that money because, unfortunately, 3 years later, on September 14th, 1899, the unlucky Henry Bliss was struck and killed by an automobile while getting off a streetcar. Exactly 100 years later, on September 13th, 1999, a safety awareness organization named City Streets placed a plaque at the site of Henry Bliss's death, which you can now see, but not on Street View, because I tried.
I remember seeing...
Thank you. All right, that's enough.
I remember seeing maybe you watched this with me, or maybe it was when you were out getting a dog, I don't know, but there was a show that talked about how when automobiles first became popular, specifically here in New York City, that there were
murderous motor vehicles,
tasting blood. Yeah. The cars were tasting blood. The automotive industry hired like publicists.
Oh yeah, because
to make it the pedestrians' fault.
So the pedestrians were supposed to have the right of way,
yeah.
And because they kept getting mowed over by these cars, the automotive industry was like, well, obviously these people are hooligans and they deserve to die.
That's how jaywalking laws were passed.
I guess at the time, the term jay was like a terrible insult. So they put this phrase in newspaper articles, and they were like, they're jaywalkers, and they really wanted it like to flip the script so that they were the innocent ones, and these people were just leaping out in front of their nice vehicles. It's terrible. What was that show? That was a good show.
Adam
Oh.
Ruins Everything.
Yep. Yeah,
you guys
that's a
watch
good
that?
show. That's good fun.
There's some good stuff in there, for sure.
He's a little cutie cute. yeah, right? I put him in my pocket.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh my.
Oh.
You need a moment?
My birthday earrings. Right? They came in the mail, and he insisted on giving them to me early.
That's not true at all. She pouted until I let her open them.
That's what happened.
What the hell? They're mail order earrings, you know.
Yeah. We've had so much fun here.
You have
we had
pictures,
to
right?
change our flight. Oh, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's
I wanted
okay.
to talk about the dog more.
Yeah,
I got
we'll do that.
distracted because we're getting a dog.
Yeah, I know.
But I do have pictures. Yes, please. Let's see the pictures before I forget. All right. There's Henry Bliss. He doesn't look like he's having a great time in life. There we go. There's Mary Alice, the willful child, who is like in her 40s. So there's the Colonial Hotel, not to be confused with the other one. And here's the obit where it's like, hey, he got hit by this thing, but down here it's all like, oh, but remember that time that his stepdaughter killed someone?
And in the headline right below that says,
"What's doing in this city?"
Peddler killed by grocer. I wish we had that article.
Yeah,
That
neighborhood
would've
grocer.
been- Yeah, neighborhood grocer. Guys, we've had a great time with you all tonight. We appreciate you coming out. It's, as we mentioned, it's been a year and a half since we've done a live show. And we also mentioned that we did not have a merch table this time. That's because due to the pandemic, we were overloaded with back inventory of like for the last 2 tours of T-shirts that we had not sold. We didn't feel right selling them, so we're going to give them away here tonight. Is that okay with you?
Yeah. Amber said I can punt them to you.
Yeah, she's gonna...
Promise not to sue me if you get punted in the face, okay? Because I love punting things.
She's a punter. There you go.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay. They're all going to go in the same spot.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, let's just pass them out. There we go. Amber will
Apparently,
pass
my punting is very figurable. Right? You're so good at that.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
do what I can.
So we actually had to change our flights so we could go home early to get this dog. He's a little guy, a little Basenji mix, and I love him.
Yeah.
And that's all I want to talk about now.
Okay.
Is my dog.
And
we're gonna call him Howard Moon.
Howard Moon. Yes.
Right now he's Nigel.
Nigel's good too, but
yeah.
We thought Howard Moon, an homage to the
Mighty
Boosh. Yeah. We look forward to the next show. We haven't booked one yet. We wanted to kind of just come out and see you guys this time and then wait till things settle down a bit more. But we're looking at a full tour sometime next year.
Woot, woot.
And we're very excited about that. And we would love to come back to New York and see you all. And thank you so much for coming out and certainly for those of you who traveled great distances.
And thank you to Caveat for having us. I love this place.
This place is great.
It is the coolest. So the book's amazing. The bar, amazing. Love you all. You've been so great. Thank you so, so much.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Until then, keep flying that freak flag.
Fly it proudly, you beautiful freaks.